Hello again. The thumbnail to this video shows a site in Israel by the River Jordan up in the Galilee. Alabadia was an Arab village until 1948, and it's where some of the earliest human remains have been discovered outside Africa. I lived next to Alabadia for a year or so at Kibbutz Betzera. A few million years ago, there were various hominids, which is to say large apes, living in Africa. They all stayed there in Africa because there's only a narrow land bridge leading from Africa to the rest of the world, and most apes tend not to be explorers or adventurers. This land bridge is the Sinai Peninsula, which leads to Israel and from there to the landmass of Eurasia. About 1.5 million years ago, an ancestor of modern humans called Homo erectus crossed the Sinai, which might perhaps have been a little more hospitable at that time, and moved to Israel. These early humans camped at Alabadia and lived by an ancient lake there. Their stone tools and the remains of the animals which they caught and butchered were excavated there during the 1970s. Even today, it's a very lovely spot, like the Garden of Eden. Homo erectus then moved out and colonised Asia as far as Java in the East Indies. In the course of hundreds of thousands of years or so, some of the Homo erectus living in and near Africa evolved into a new species, Homo Heidelbergensis. The earliest humans in Europe, including Britain that is, belong to this species. Remains have been found at Boxgrave in Sussex of a specimen of Homo heidelbergensis, dating back about 500,000 years. So far, there's broad agreement on the outline of early humanity, which I've sketched out. What happened next, though, is still not entirely clear. We know that Homo erectus carried on living in Asia. It seems very likely that Homo heidelbergensis in Africa, though, began to evolve differently from those living in Europe and Western Asia. In Africa, Homo sapiens emerged, which is our own species. In Europe, the Neanderthals came into being, and further east, another species on the edge of Asia, which we call the Denisovans. At that point, there were no fewer than 4 human species on Earth. There may have been more, but we know there were at least 4. And here is where things get a little bit tricky. The most common story told is that the Homo sapiens crossed into Europe from Africa and then took over as the Neanderthals were unable to compete with the superior new species with their hunting techniques and thought processes and so on. What actually happened was more interesting than that. Homo sapiens did cross over the Sinai and entered Israel and the general area of the Middle East. The remains in Israel at various caves show that Homo sapiens were living there about 100,000 years ago. They didn't move into Europe or Asia, though, and displace the Neanderthals. In fact, the reverse happened. As the Neanderthals expanded from their European homeland into Asia and the Middle East, they travelled south, and encountering the Homo sapiens in the Middle East, they squeezed them out and caused them to retreat back into Africa. This isn't what those carrying out all the excavations in Israel expected to find, but the fact was that the Neanderthals carried on dominating the Middle East, Europe and parts of Asia for another 50,000 years or so. Homo sapiens seemed to be no match for the Neanderthals. Which isn't, of course, the way that the story runs as we've received it. When Homo sapien left Africa again, they then pushed the Neanderthals into extinction. What had changed? Well, nothing really, except that when the Homo sapiens started moving across the Sinai Peninsula this time, they began having sex with the Neanderthals. perhaps on the principle if you can't beat them, join them. The offspring of these unions seem to be a little bit different from both Neanderthals and other Homo sapiens. They were perhaps brighter and more ingenious. At any rate, they inherited some genes from the Neanderthals which gave them an edge over both kinds of humans in Europe and the Middle East. This was roughly 40 or 50,000 years ago. These hybrids then moved into Asia and Europe. Some of the genes which the Neanderthals passed on related to brain size and function. After all, the Neanderthals had to have something going for them mentally to be able to survive hundreds of thousands of years through ice ages and so on. The Homo sapiens moving into Asia also interbred with the Denisovans and picked up some of their genes too. The Homo sapiens who remained in Africa didn't get any Neanderthal or Denisovan genes, although later some might have filtered back into Africa, but not in the same percentage as those found in Europeans and Asians. I think this is about enough for now, and I will talk more about this subject later. Before ending though, I will point out that those proportions of Neanderthal genes which are found in Europeans and Asians tie in very precisely with measured IQ today. In East Asia, about 3 or 4% of the average person's genome is Neanderthal. East Asians have the highest IQ. In Europe, the amount is roughly half that, and in sub-Saharan Africa, it varies between none at all and about a sixth of what is found in white Europeans. In other words, the more Neanderthal genes that modern humans have, the more intelligent they seem to be.